Howdy, Broncos country. Mase here to recap what went on with the Broncos on Thursday, the last day before they scattered for Labor Day weekend to get a respite before they come back for practice on Monday and start getting ready for Week 1 and the Tennessee Titans. Interestingly, the biggest thing for the Broncos, at least long-term, may have been regarding Micah Parsons and the contract he got from the Green Bay Packers after being traded by the Cowboys to the Packers because, of course, of any impact that might have on a deal with Nik Bonitto, another edge rusher. Micah Parsons getting a deal that involves $188 million over 4 years if he plays out the 4-year contract, $47 million per year, $136 million in guarantees. Both of those are the biggest for any edge rusher, any defensive player in NFL history. And let's take a look at those contracts and where they line up. And certainly with Nik Bonitto still working on his deal with the Broncos, you wonder what impact that's going to have on the market. There's Micah Parsons atop the list, followed by Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, and TJ Watt. Of course, those guys all with guarantees north of $100 million. You see their average per year. Nick Bosa has a lower average per year figure in that, but a higher guarantee than some others that are going to be in that 30-some million dollar a year range in terms of average per year figure. So this is where the Broncos and being cash rich could come into play, because maybe you see on Nik Bonitto a higher guarantee but a lower average per year. Let's get into the next wave of contracts. So you see Max Crosby, and then you have Josh Hines-Allen at $88 million in terms of his guarantee, and then Brian Burns and Montez Sweat. All of these guarantees but Montez Sweat, you are talking about guaranteed figure. Again, the guarantee, the total guarantee, not the full guarantee. You're talking about guarantees that exceed that, of course, that the Broncos gave to Pat Surtain with his contract. And also, of course, Zach Allen with his contract. Zach Allen got $69.5 million in guarantees. Pat Surtain, $77.5 million in guarantees. And then Courtland Sutton coming in somewhere below that, $41 million. So basically what we're talking about here for Nik Bonitto, assuming it gets done, and every indication is that it's going to get done, even though Nik Bonitto only has the one great season on his ledger, and that was, of course, last year, 13.5 sacks, he's probably going to get a contract that at minimum is going to put him in this top 8. I think it's going to push him at least beyond Montez Sweat. I think you have to expect that. And the question is, does it push him into the Max Crosby, Nick Bosa range? If that's the case, we are talking about a guarantee that is going to be well north of Pat Surtain's guarantee. The significance of that is certainly worth noting. But that's the going rate for edge rushers these days. You kind of have to think of edge as almost your defensive quarterback in terms of outlay. Obviously, not to the same degree as quarterback on offense, but just say, okay, this is the position where you're going to have to invest the most. If you're going to have a top-level edge, this is going to be the going rate. Of course, Nik Bonitto, when he had a press conference not so long ago, did not seem particularly worried about the contract. And here's George Paton when asked about whether the Micah Parsons deal, which as of Thursday morning when Payton met with media via conference call, had not been done. He was asked whether the Parsons deal was going to impact the Nik Bonitto deal. Here's Payton on that.
And, as far as any other stuff, we're just going to, we've done a good job of keeping these things quiet and respectful. We're just going to keep it that way.
So a very general answer from George Paton there, but certainly you expect this thing to be done, but one does wonder if the Parsons contract and how it raises the bar throws a wrench into that, because Micah Parsons, in terms of his average per year figure, took that number $6 million higher than the standard set by TJ Watt just a few short months ago. Another thing to touch on from Thursday's practice specifically was that this was the first practice session where Sean Payton tested out the new practice protocol for Jeremy Crawshaw and punting, wherein they stop a regular period of practice, have a punt, and then go back to what they were doing. We saw this a few times during the practice. Here's Sean Payton talking about it.
It was a great idea by Riz. You know, we get into these periods and then we go punt and we're going to have a punt period, right? But in the game, you know, it's punt, you're out there, one punt, you know, and so you're on hole 17, it's a par 5, you're on the tee. And just creating those situations, I think benefits the young punter, because that's kind of the game, you know. If you said, hey, we're going to go out there, we're punting, and everyone chill out for a second while he hits 3, and then he's going to punt on, that's not very realistic. So I thought he handled it well. I thought it went well, and we'll continue to do that.
It seemed to work out pretty well. The punts did the job. So if Crawshaw goes out there against Tennessee and punts in those one-offs the way he did on Thursday, then problem solved. But as we know, you got to do it when the lights go on. So we'll see if it translates. But Sean Payton, pretty happy with what he saw on Thursday with that revised protocol for how he's going to go about the punting period, hoping that this will fix the glitch, because the ratio of good punts to bad punts for Jeremy Crawshaw in preseason games was basically the inverse of what we saw in training camp practices. Going back to contracts, Nik Bonitto's contract, not the only one that came up. Also, John Franklin Myers' deal, that was discussed by George Paton on Thursday. Here's what Payton had to say about that.
Yeah, John is a really good player. Man, big bonus. We were able to get John last year, and like a number of other of our players in the final year of their deals, we'd like to have them all back. And John's no different. We have a number of players, and it's a puzzle. It's kind of like your roster management, like the 53-man. And so we're working through a lot of that now, but we're excited to have John Franklin. We're excited to have Wattenberg and a lot of these guys in the last years of their deals. So.
Now, of course, JFM's contract and that of Malcolm Roach on the defensive line. You have to weigh those in light of the Broncos keeping 7 defensive linemen. They went heavy there because of the quality they have on the back end of that room, with Sai'Vion Jones, the third-round rookie, having an outstanding camp, and also Jordan Jackson and Eni Awazarike, 2 guys that are also on rookie contracts, having very good camps as well. And certainly their progress may factor into decisions made on JFM and Malcolm Roach after the season. Sai'Vion Jones especially looking the part in training camp. We may not see him get a jersey in week 1. We probably won't see many games where there are 6 defensive linemen active, although you may see some against some run-heavy teams. And perhaps you might see that in week 1 if the Titans decide to protect Cam Ward a little bit in his first start by running the ball more. So you might see the Broncos expecting some heavier packages, and so they go with 6 defensive linemen anticipating that. But with young defensive linemen developing and with Zach Allen getting that big extension, you may be able to kind of see some of the writing on the wall a little bit for what the long-term plan is on the defensive line. And John Franklin Myers may just be able to get a bigger and better deal elsewhere than what the Broncos may be able to do. With all these big contracts coming in, the Broncos may be getting to a point where there may have to be some difficult choices. Like George Paton said, it's a puzzle. That's just sort of the reality of what they're facing. So, Broncos, they wrapped up the week. It's a weekend, a long weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they're back at it with a practice on Labor Day. We'll have all that covered at denversports.com and on Orange and Blue today. So, until next time, take care. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.